All right, I reckon start the webinar and then I'll let people in as they request.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to our very first Packed with Goodness webinar. My name is Michaela Atkinson. I'm the coordinator of the Packed with Goodness program. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast today, the Noongar Whadjuk people. We'd also like to pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and offer our acknowledgement and respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be present. So welcome. We normally deliver these sessions face-to-face within the school setting or a library or community centre. And in those sessions, we hand out a resource pack to all the parents who attend on the day. The resource pack's really fantastic. It's full of lots of bits and pieces that complement the content that we talk about today. And at the end of the session, we're going to be sending out a post-session link with a bit of a survey that just asks you how you found the content and helps us evaluate whether we're on the right track. There'll be a section in there for you to fill out your details if you would like to receive the resource pack, and we can get one posted out to you. We also normally in our sessions stop and interact with our parents and answer questions, but obviously today we're going to be scooting through the content. And we encourage you to use the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen if you've got any questions that you would like to throw in the mix, and we'll do our best at the end to answer them. Obviously, if there's any questions that we don't get to, we will sift through and we can answer you by email directly. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Alrighty. So today we are going to be chatting about packing a healthy lunchbox, some practical tips and tricks to increase your success with a healthy lunchbox and try and keep costs down. We're going to be chatting about why it's important to make sure vegetables are finding their way into the lunchbox, some sort of simple tips to swap out processed and packaged foods, a little bit about the school canteen, a little bit about label reading, and a little bit about sugary drinks. We don't want to bombard parents. We don't want you to feel that we're giving unrealistic advice or advice that's hard to achieve. We just want to highlight the importance of packing a healthy lunchbox and hopefully share some tips that show you that it's actually not that hard to achieve with a little bit of planning and some sort of simple ideas here and there. We can have more success with healthy lunches. So, starting off with what we should be eating. This is the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. It is a model that is stems from the Australian Dietary Guideline, which you can see in the top left-hand corner there, which says that we are to enjoy a wide variety of nutritious foods from these 5 food groups every day and to drink plenty of water. The Australian Guide to Healthy Eating model is similar to the Mediterranean diet, which is one that is low in saturated fats, low in salts, low in sugars, and nice and high in your vitamins, your minerals, your fibre and your antioxidants. It represents the best way of eating for the whole of the population, for optimum growth and development, and for reducing common lifestyle diseases. It's designed to represent a plate and to try and show us the 5 food groups that we should be drawing on when it comes to our meals. And those 5 food groups are, as you can see here, grains and cereals, which includes your breads, your rices, your pastas, veggies of all different colours, fruits, again, a nice variety of colours, your dairy or dairy alternatives, and your lean meats and meat alternatives such as your poultry, your eggs, your fish, your nuts. The Australian Guide to Healthy Eating is designed to show healthy balance and to kind of give you a bit of an idea of the proportions of foods that we want people to be drawing when filling their plate. And that's roughly 40% from your fruits and veggies, about a third from grains and cereals, and about a quarter from your nice high protein foods. The serves depend on your, the serves that you would draw on from those 5 food groups depend on your age, your weight, your gender, your height, and your physical activity. The Australian Guide to Healthy Eating also highlights that we encourage you to drink water, and also that fats and oils are essential for cooking your whole foods. They do contain vitamins and minerals, but the advice is obviously that we use them in small amounts. Similarly, the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating highlights in the bottom right-hand corner there our junk foods or our discretionary foods, and they are what you see there, commonly your chips, your chocolate, your lollies, your takeaway foods, your sugary drinks, your biscuits, your cakes, and they intentionally sit outside of the plate because they are not essential for healthy growth and development. Junk foods are normally higher in fats, salts and sugars, and lower in nutrition. And if eaten often or in large quantities, then they displace your opportunity or limit your opportunity to be drawing from these 5 core food groups, which is what we want everyone to be drawing on when they're trying to put together a nice healthy diet and packing a healthy lunchbox. So throughout the presentation, I will refer to the core food groups or the 5 food groups, and when I say that, I'm talking about this plate here. This is a really nice simplified version of the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. It's less cluttered, it's more accessible, I find it much more user-friendly, and it's a nice way to get the message across without it being quite so busy. It's got this really lovely simplified eat most, eat some, eat least message. It shows the kilo by kilo cost saving, that when you are eating mostly plant foods, you're shopping most economically. It also has this lovely 3-colour code finish, which I really like because it shows that grains and cereals are also a plant food. So it's just highlighting that you mostly want to be eating from those plant foods, adding some food from animals, and eating least from the junk food category. It's a really nice message also that you can translate to the trolley when you're doing the shopping for the week. So when you're filling it up, thinking about having mostly foods from the plant food groups, some foods from animals, and least from junk foods. Similarly to the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating on the page before, the junk foods intentionally sit outside of this plate because, as we said before, they are low in nutrition and usually higher in fat, salts and sugars. And as you can see from a kilo per kilo comparison, they're going to cost you a lot more in the long run if they're the foods that you're throwing in your trolley. Okay, so now that we have talked about what it is that we should be eating, we know, the targets that we want to be hitting. The question is, are our kids munching on enough? When it comes to veggies in particular, the answer unfortunately is no. The stats are, as you can see there, that only 1 in every 17 Australian children are eating their 5 serves of veggies every day. This means not eating those veggies, that they're missing out on a range of really vital vitamins and minerals, and those are the kind of vitamins that help with growth and development, that help with increasing concentration, that build a really strong immune system, and that prevent a range of chronic diseases. So it also means if kids aren't eating their veggies like we want them to be, that, as we highlighted on the slide before, perhaps parents are possibly spending more money on food that is not as nutritious and that won't go as far. All right, so stemming from this stat that we just talked about on the previous slide, only 1 in 17 Aussie kids getting their 5 serves of veggies, we kind of want to talk about, well, how do we increase those serves? And this slide is a nice way to show that we can't leave eating all your veggies until dinner time. It's just not realistic that kids can eat 5 serves of veggies at the end of the day. Not only do they have other food groups that need to be fit in when it comes to dinner, but they also only have small stomachs, so they can't actually eat as much food in one sitting as adults can. So we really want to see 2 and 5 scattered across the day if we can. So obviously there are different ways you could do that. This is just one example. But, you know, for example, if you throw a banana in at breakfast time, I always mash a banana onto the toast. My kids are having cottage cheese and banana, or they might have peanut butter and banana. They might have yogurt and berries on their toast. So I try and throw something in at that breakfast. It might also be mushrooms on toast, but it's something there that's started the ball rolling. You might serve a vegetable-based dip at morning tea, a cheese and salad sandwich at lunch, dice up some fruits for afternoon tea, and then obviously some veg for dinner. But essentially it's just showing you that they need to be scattered across the day if you're going to hit those targets by the end. A reminder that half a cup when it comes to cooked vegetables is 1 serve, and 1 cup when it comes to raw vegetables is 1 serve. In our resource pack that I mentioned before that the parents are given when they attend the sessions, we have this great booklet. So it's the Packed with Goodness booklet. It mirrors the content that we talk about today, and it's got heaps of great information in there, but in particular there's some great tips on how to munch on more during the day. So if you get yourself a pack, we'll give you some more ideas. Right, so this is a really fun stat that we love to share just to kind of bring to parents' attention that by the end of your child's schooling journey, you will have packed 2,500 lunch boxes for them to enjoy. And obviously some of those may have been meals ordered from the canteen, but essentially it means you've got 2,500 opportunities to be packing your child healthy foods and to be building those healthy habits. Considering kids spend about 1/3 of their day at school, we would love, you know, we ideally want to see about 1/3 of their food packed in the lunchbox. And that translates, as you can see down the bottom here, to 2 serves of veg and 1 serve of fruit. And if that feels unrealistic or difficult, don't forget that if your school's a crunch and sip school, that some of those serves of veg can be in your crunch and sip as well. They don't necessarily all have to be in the lunchbox, but throwing in more is always better. School lunchboxes obviously need to feature all the food groups that we've talked about, or draw on all those core food groups that we've talked about, your grains and cereals, your meats and meat alternatives, your dairy, as well as your veggies and your fruits. But the discussion that we are having today is primarily around getting more veggies into our kids and helping you find ways for more vegetables to be in that lunchbox. And don't forget to also always pack kids a water bottle, a refillable water bottle, to get them through the day. All right, so how do you pack a lunchbox with goodness? We understand that packing a healthy and balanced lunchbox can feel quite daunting for parents. We know parents struggle to keep it interesting. Parents struggle to feel as though they're balancing the lunchbox well, and also parents struggle to figure out how much they should be packing. So we really hope that Packed with Goodness can help make your mornings a little bit easier. By the end of this session, we hope you can glance down at the lunchbox in the morning and just think, yep, main mini munch, which we will explain in a moment and go over in detail. We hope you have a few more ideas for some simple ways to throw veggies into the lunchbox, and we hope that you feel more confident when it comes to making your own healthy snacks and trying to keep those costs down. Remember that knowing how to pack a healthy lunchbox is relevant to all of us. It's not just relevant to our kids. Ideally, we are all leaving the house in the morning with either a healthy lunchbox or healthy snacks packed to get us through the day. So, as I said, each day kids need a main, a mini and a munch, which we will go into. Crunch and sit as well. We hope you're packing crunch and sit. We will also go into that in a little bit. But the main message here is that if it's all healthy food that you're packing, then anything that children reach for will provide them with long-lasting energy. All right, so let's talk about the main. I called it the main for the very express purpose of highlighting that lunch is the main meal of the day. We find that parents feel very clear that dinner is the main meal, and so it's a time where you serve up whole foods and real foods and you prepare foods. But that's losing sight of the fact that breakfast and lunch are also main meals. So they're also meals that need to be substantial and that are ideally drawing on those core food groups that we've talked about. Lunch typically is your cereals and grains, your proteins, and hopefully your veggies. So that's what we know commonly sandwiches or wraps, but it could also include things like sushi, homemade savoury muffins, pizza scroll, frittata, any leftovers such as pasta, rice salad or curry. But there's a few really important points two really important points to emphasise here. And the first is just don't forget the veggies. When you're preparing the main meal, do your best to make sure it always includes some veggies. And that's throwing the salad in the sandwich, that's grating veggies through a savoury muffin, that's dicing up some veggies and stirring it through a pasta dish. It's just making sure that they don't get left out, or at the very least that they're on the side of whatever it is that the main meal is. And then the other important point is don't forget to pack the protein. Protein is really essential for children's growth and development. It helps them feel full for longer, so it's great for concentration. And there's really great sources of protein that you can throw in, and they're things like your cheese, your salmon, your tuna, your chicken, your beef, your hummus, your beans, hard-boiled eggs. This goes on. So remembering to pack the protein is quite important in a lunchbox. So this is a slide just to show a few examples of some main meals. It is not a one-size-fits-all model when it comes to lunchboxes, and the advice that we provide is general. But just looking at some of these examples, you can see that mostly they contain some grains, some veg and some protein. You know, you've got your pesto pasta salad at the top there that might have been left over from lunch on the weekend. You've got a spinach and feta frittata on the right there. You might have made that in bulk or frozen, which is easy to pull out and throw in. You've got a rice salad or a fried rice, again, might have been last night's dinner, potato salad. In the bottom left, a little mushroom quiche. It could be any veggie, doesn't need to be mushroom, but really easy to make, freeze, and then throw in the lunchbox. It's just basically showing you that there's a variety of ways to pack a main meal, and maybe hopefully this slide sort of provides a little bit of inspiration and shows you some other ways to do it. Having said that, if a sandwich is working for you and you're throwing in some grainy bread, some salad and a bit of protein, and that's been eaten, then brilliant, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a really great job. It's important for us that you feel supported, and if simple works, then keep on doing what you're doing. But if you're looking for some more ideas or inspiration, then here are some great examples. And on our website, we've got all the recipes to a lot of these options, so you can sift through and see what grabs your attention or what you think your child might like, if you feel like it's time to throw something different in there or change it up a bit. All right, so while we're talking about sandwiches, it's a really good time to talk about processed meats. What are they and should I be packing them? Processed meats include ham, bacon, pastrami, salami, bratwurst and frankfurts. Ham is a really common ingredient in kids' lunchboxes. it was once something that was eaten far less frequently, and now it's a part of many people's weekly shops and bought in enough quantity to kind of go in sandwiches quite frequently. It's not surprising that ham appeals to kids. It's not a strong flavour, but it's nice and salty, and kids' palates just love foods like that. If ham is eaten on a regular basis, it comes with some consequences. So there's some long-term consequences and some short-term consequences. So just outlining them quite quickly. The long-term consequences to having frequent consumption of processed meats is that the studies have linked this increased consumption with an increased risk of bowel cancer. And this is to do with the way that processed meats are cured and preserved, and the way that those processes and preservatives react in our digestive tract. On the short-term consequence level, processed meats commonly have higher fats and higher salts. So if they're being eaten frequently, then there's an increased consumption of fats and salts across the week. So as we said before, when we were talking about protein examples, there are so many great alternatives to ham that you can throw in a lunchbox. And again, on our website, we have a link that shows a whole raft of sandwich filling ideas, and it's a really great way to just get a few new ideas in the mix to try and change it up with your child. But they're things like shredding some chicken, or a little bit of beef off a roast that you've done on the weekend, or hard boiling eggs. I always hard boil eggs the night before, make sure it's nice and easy for them to go in the sandwich in the morning. Cheese, there are lots of different kinds of cheese. It doesn't have to be just cheddar. You've got cottage cheese, you've got ricotta, you've got a little bit of feta. Turkey, hummus. There's lots of other alternatives. If it feels difficult to swap out the processed meats, then start the process slowly. Change it up one day of the week and then build from there. Okay, so moving on to the mini. Remembering what we said before, children have smaller stomachs, so they need to eat between their main meals. We call the recess, so the mini is what you would typically know as recess, and we've called it the mini because essentially in the same way that we're saying the main meal needs to draw on those core food groups, so does the mini ideally. It's just a smaller version of it, so that's why it's your mini meal. Typically when we look at lunchboxes, the mini meal or the recess is where junk food often finds its way into the lunchbox. But the mini meal is actually a really great opportunity to be drawing on those core food groups and to be packing some healthy snacks rather than some processed and packaged snacks. We suggest that when you're packing the mini that you draw on the core food groups that didn't go into the main. So that will kind of balance a lunchbox nice and easily for you. And that, for example, would mean if you've packed a chicken and salad roll or a wrap, that you might throw in a little tub of yogurt and berries. If you've packed a frittata or a quiche that's quite egg-based, you might throw in a nice whole grain muffin. If you've packed a vegetarian pasta, you might throw in a chicken drumstick from a roast that you did on the weekend. So it's not a hard and fast rule, just do your best, but that's sort of a nice way to think about balancing the lunchbox. When all the food that you're packing is healthy, then it doesn't matter if kids swap it around and they eat their main meal at recess or their mini meal at lunchtime, because everything that they're reaching for is good, healthy, wholesome food. And it comes back to that message that we said in the beginning. If it's healthy, wholesome food, it's going to provide them with long-lasting energy. Most importantly, if you pack a healthy mini meal, you're showing kids that snacks can be healthy too, because typically, snacks can sort of be associated with more processed and packaged foods. So again, this is a slide just to show an example of lots of yummy and healthy mini meals that you can reach for. So yeah, it's as simple as some pikelets that you might have made for Sunday morning breakfast and there was some left over, or putting a bit of yogurt and some berries in a little container from a big tub, spooning into a small container, throwing in with a little ice block. some whole grain fruit bread from the loaf, thrown in the freezer, pull pieces out as you need them. Hard boiling an egg, some cheese and crackers from the container, a big container, and just cut some cheese off your block. Baked beans, just decanted straight from the can. Kids actually do eat baked beans cold, or if your child's particularly not into them cold, you can get a little thermos and put them in warm, and they'll stay warm until they're ready to be eaten. But essentially this slide's just showing you that there's such a variety of ways to pack a healthy mini meal. And in packing a variety of options, you're also throwing in a variety of nutrients. There are so many benefits that come from packing healthy snacks, and they're things like obviously providing extra nutrition because kids have those small stomachs, so they need bang for their buck. But there's also managing portion size, because you yourself decide the portion size of the meal, not the food manufacturer deciding the portion size. You save money when you buy in bulk and pack your own or make your own, and also you reduce the packaging and the use of plastics. So we just want to show you that healthy can be convenient too. All right, so as we were saying, the mini meal is often where junk food tends to find its way into the lunchbox. These are some of the more common examples that are chosen for the lunchbox. But these are foods that will be low in nutrition and are what we would consider highly processed foods. And we can spot that they're highly processed foods because they'll often have a long list of ingredients. They'll often be ingredients that you may not recognise. They will have gone through complicated processing steps, and they're things like hydrogenation, emulsification, moulding, and so on. They will be processes that you can't replicate in the home, so you may not be able to make these yourself. They'll contain little or no whole foods, even though they may be marketed as whole foods. And they'll come in packaging that's really brightly coloured and very eye-catching to children. So they're kind of some ticks that show you that it's a highly processed food. So remember, as we said before, if you swap out these processed food and throw in some healthy snacks, some homemade or whole food options, then you're managing the portion size, you're reducing the amount of added fats, sugars and salts, and you can be adding whole grains, adding veggies and saving money. So these are some really nice, easy swaps that we suggest that you can use to as an alternative. So you go getting your berries instead of your chocolate-based custard. Cutting your own cheese from the block and some crackers from a bulk container instead of your snack. Throwing in just an apple instead of a rolled up. Some fruit bread, whole grain fruit bread from the loaf, and some pikelets. And whilst some of them are still store-bought options, like your bread or your crackers, they're not highly processed foods, and you know that because they don't have a long list of ingredients. You would recognise the ingredients. You could probably make them at home if you wanted to. And so, yeah, there are options that you can draw on from the supermarket that aren't in the highly processed food category. And then you've got other alternatives here, like your pikelets, your popcorn and your fruit, that are simply a whole food or homemade swap out. The other useful thing about this slide is just to highlight the cost saving that we've talked about before. So on a kilo by kilo basis, if you were to buy a kilo of roll-ups, it would cost you roughly $45, as opposed to a kilo of apples where you're looking at $4 to $5. Similarly with the snacks, if you were to buy a kilo of snacks, it would cost you around $35, as opposed to buying a kilo of granny crackers and cheese to cut up and serve yourself, you're looking at about $13. So it comes back to what we said before. If you're swapping out the process of package and making your own, then you're shopping more economically. Okay, so should these be in the lunchbox? Think back to the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating and think about what we said with the plate and with what sits outside the plate. And these are the kind of foods that sit outside the plate. These are junk foods. These are high in fats, salts and sugars, and they offer very little nutrition. And so for this reason, we suggest that they are best left out of the lunchbox. Typically, we would have called these foods birthday party foods because they were designed to be a one-off. They were designed to be occasional. They were designed to be sort of a novelty food. However, if junk foods are appearing in the lunchbox on a regular basis, then they become everyday food and they're no longer a sometimes food. And this makes it really difficult for children to develop healthy habits around food and to distinguish between those everyday and those sometimes foods. So wherever you can, we suggest that you just do your best, but leave those treats out of the lunchbox. Remember also, if you don't buy it, then you save yourself a battle at home. So rather will you buy the foods that you want your kids to be packing in the lunchbox over the foods that you're going to spend all your time policing so that they're not asking you to draw on those foods for the lunchbox. Another issue we often find parents raising with us is that they feel like a treat will boost their child and help them through a difficult time. And that might mean that the child is being bullied, or that they have a really difficult test coming up, or that they are just generally suffering stress or anxiety. And parents feel as though a treat kind of is a substitute for not being there with their child, and that it will boost them up. And whilst I understand the sort of concept behind that, there are lots of other really nice ways to achieve the same outcome that aren't to do with food. And one of the resources that's in the pack that is available to you is this sheet of really lovely lunchbox notes. And they just tear off, they're nice and robust, they can be used again and again. They're just a whole suite of really lovely little sayings that you can throw in the lunchbox. So you've got a nice note, you've got a sticker, you've got other really sweet little ways to say, I'm here for you, do well, be brave, I love you, without it necessarily being to do with food. Don't forget that there are so many moments in a child's week where they're exposed to junk food and junk food advertising. So let's try and just keep the lunchbox a place that's free of that as best we can. Okay, so moving on to the munch. Basically, if you feel that the main and the mini are not enough for your child and you think that they're still going to be hungry, then throw in some extra veggies or fruits. And that's what the munch is. It is vegetable or fruit only. It's just a perfect filler to beef up the lunchbox. And it's a great way to start the habit early on that if you're hungry, have a piece of fruit. If you're hungry, chop up a carrot. If you're hungry, reach for veggies, reach for fruits. This could be, some celery and carrot sticks. It could be a steamed corn cob from last night's dinner. It could be a whole apple, a banana. Try and change it up if you can, so that it's a variety of different things to munch on, not just the same things every day. And remember that the munch is separate to crunch and zip, which is another fantastic opportunity for kids to be getting extra serves of veg and fruit across the day. Because it all adds up and we want to be hitting that target of those 5 veggies. So obviously it's a simple message, add extra veg and fruit if your child needs more food. But this slide is just a nice way to show that it's good to serve them in a variety of ways. Kids who are a little bit resistant to veggies, you can get them on board by trying it in a variety of ways. And that may be that your child is not a big fan of raw carrots, but if you were to roast them, they quite like them. And what often happens is if you have success in one way, you get them on board, then you can be a little bit more adventurous with the way that you serve the veggies. And the other point that we want to raise here is the variety, it can include things like steaming, mashing, grating, roasting, pickling, or serving raw. There's so many different ways to serve a vegetable, not just, chopping and throwing it in as it is. We encourage parents to listen to their children as well along the way, because their preferences and their interests might change. The way that they want their veggies served might change. And so you need to be asking the right questions to be getting the right answers. And a good example of that is a child may love chopped up apple when they're younger and then get to the point where actually I just want a whole apple so I can grab it and go. So just making sure that you're growing with your child is going to guarantee more success with the veggies over the years as well. And the other thing that we say is don't limit your child's preferences based on your own. So throw things in there that you may not necessarily eat yourself because you just never know. I always use my son as an example who loves raw mushrooms. And I love mushrooms, but I love them cooked. I'm not a fan of a raw mushroom, or it's not something I would lean on often, but I threw them in his crunch and zip because who knows, and they all got eaten. So yeah, don't limit what you put in based on your own preferences. Some other important points to remember if you're having difficulty with your child eating their veggies, eat together as a family as often as you can. It's really important that parents are modelling to their children that they enjoy their vegetables too, and that you're eating the kinds of foods that you expect your children to be eating. 20 yucks to 1 yum is a really interesting concept. Children can say yuck to a vegetable up to 20 times and then eat it on the 21st. And there's no rhyme or reason to why that happens. But if you don't give them the opportunity, if you label your child as not liking something and you stop serving it for them, you don't give them the opportunity to change their mind. So I never use words like you don't like. I might say things like it's not your favourite or you're not a fan at the moment, but it's never a hard and fast you're not into that vegetable, because they will parrot that and they will say that back themselves, and that's self-limiting. Yeah, so it's important to keep on packing, keep on serving, and keep veggies in the frame for kids. Which comes to this message, which is a really, the crux of what we're saying here today, is it's let's make veggies the star of the show. Veggies are fantastic. They're cheap, they cook easily, they cook in a variety of ways, they store really well, they're very nutritious. We want them to be front and centre for children. We want them to be the norm, and we want kids to be learning to reach for them, you know, because they're a great, nutritious food that kids need to be in the habit of eating. Talk to your kids also about eating the rainbow of veggies, because the wider variety of colours of vegetables kids are eating, the wider variety of nutrients they're getting. Parents often talk to us about behind the scenes, the fact that they are grating and hiding veggies in their kids' food, which is fantastic. Veggies are, you know, as we said, nutritious, they bulk food up, they're cheap, they are a great filler. However, whilst hiding veggies behind the scenes, always make sure you're serving them front and centre as well. Kids have to see, taste, feel, and learn to love their veggies. And if they're not seeing the veggies, then they're not managing to develop those preferences and those favourites, and also learning how you actually prepare vegetables to enjoy and eat and eventually prepare themselves. So yes, hide behind the scenes, but also have it front and centre as well. All right, so this is a slide to show a bit of a snapshot of some really easy, balanced, healthy lunchboxes. And I mean, at first glance, we often find parents say that this feels a little polished and a little hard to achieve. But if you actually look sort of closely at a lot of them, they're really quite easy to manage, balanced lunchboxes that you could have made the night before quite often. So the top right is a great example. You could have hard-boiled that egg the night before. That could be a grainy muffin that you've thrown in from the freezer. That pesto pasta salad, as I said, it could have been last night's dinner, and then you quickly sliced a kiwi fruit. Similarly, the lunchbox on the bottom, you could have just decanted those baked beans straight from the tin to the container, some zucchini and corn fritters from the freezer, a muffin from the freezer, or it might have been that you made a fresh batch on the weekend, so they're good to go, and a little bunch of breads. So it doesn't have to be difficult to pack a variety of balanced lunchboxes. We are not suggesting that you pack a different lunchbox every day. We're not saying this is your week. We're simply trying to show you that there's nice variety and ways that you can keep it interesting if your child is looking for more variety, or you yourself feel like you need some new ideas. you know, we encourage parents to take away what they can from it. If you want inspiration for the main, have a look at some of the main ideas. If the main's fine for you, but you want some mini ideas, have a look at some ideas for the mini. Just use what works for you and try a variety at a pace that suits your family. For some, that may be across the week, others across a month, perhaps a term, or even a year. You know, celebrate the small wins and be kind to yourself. Okay, so then we come to water, which is the final part of the lunchbox. Water is the only drink that children need every day in their lunchbox, and it has really important functions in the body. Water is responsible for helping with digestion, for regulating our temperature, for increasing concentration, for regulating appetite. Children also need milk or milk alternatives, and if you're choosing an alternative, make sure you choose a fortified variety so that it still has your calcium in there. But when it comes to the lunchbox specifically, we encourage water only, so that kids are learning from a young age to quench their thirst with water. So our advice is to avoid packing sugary drinks. This slide is a great one for highlighting why we encourage water only for children, and just kind of how much sugar can come in sugary drinks. Sugary drinks obviously can lead to poor health, to weight gain, to tooth decay, and a range of other impacts. And this includes drinks like soft drinks, iced teas, sports drinks, fruit drinks, and also 100% fruit juice. Parents often ask us, you know, what if I make it myself, you know, or isn't juice healthy? You know, our response is always, look, eating fruit is healthy. The moment you start juicing, you remove your rough food and your fibre, and you increase your sugar. So, you know, sugar is still sugar in the body, no matter which source it comes from. And so, you know, reducing added sugar is the best approach that we suggest. So if you have a look at this slide here on the left, we've got 1 teaspoon. We're just showing you 1 teaspoon equals 4 grams. On the right, the World Health Organization recommends no more than 6 added teaspoons of sugar per day in a child's diet. And added or free sugars are the kind of sugars that we see in sugary drinks. So if you come down to the images below, we're not suggesting that your child drinks 600 mils of Coke or even 600 mils of fruit drink. But what we do want to show you is that in a 600 ml cola comes 16 teaspoons of sugar. So that's roughly 65 grams of sugar. In an orange fruit drink comes the same amount of sugar. So, as we said, whilst we're not suggesting your child drink 600 mils of Coke, what we want to show you is that a fruit juice in the morning comes with the same amount of sugar as a soft drink in the morning. And we assume you wouldn't comfortably serve up a soft drink with breakfast, but you may feel more comfortable about serving up a glass of juice with breakfast. But if you can keep that in perspective, keep that in mind, that we're looking at the same amount of sugar, then it may change the way that you feel about serving that juice. We often say if juice is a part of your household, then save it for the weekends, or serve it less often, or when you do serve it, water it down. If you start from an early age serving juice watered down, then kids won't know any different. So whilst the large juice or soft drink on the previous slide might not be something that you purchase or pack, these images here, the juice box and the pop top, are examples of juices that do more typically appear in the lunchbox. So we just wanted to show you that even these 2 smaller serves that feel more relatable for parents when it comes to kids, each still come with 4 teaspoons of sugar. So if you think about the 6 teaspoons on the slide before as a daily limit, you've already given more than half in this serve of juice. So if these are packed often, then it adds up to a lot of extra sugar through the week and across the year. So that's why we just suggest you stick with water, as you can see on the right. For an occasional treat or for something different, we recommend you go with a milk-based drink, because obviously then you're still getting your added calcium. And there are some great products on the market now that are using fruits rather than added sugars, or that are lower in sugar. Or alternatively, make your own. A smoothie is always a winner, and it can be as simple as a banana, some milk and some natural yogurt. We're ready to go. I often make that in the afternoons and pop it in the fridge ready to go, so that when my kids walk in the door, they can quickly get themselves some afternoon tea without it being too complicated for them. But yeah, when it comes to the lunchbox, pack water. Okay, so Crunch and Sip. Most schools that we visit when we do our face-to-face sessions are registered Crunch and Sip schools. If your school is not a registered Crunch and Sip school, or if you've heard about the program and you'd love it to be in your school, then jump on our website and you can register your interest, or send us an email, and we're happy to get in touch and chat to you or chat to your school. But essentially, Crunch and Sip provides WA kids with another opportunity to be trying to hit those serves. We especially encourage veggies in the Crunch and Sip, because they're the serves that we want to try and boost. Yeah, so basically kids can bring a little container in, have it on their desk. It's got chopped up veggies, chopped up fruit and a bottle of water, and they can munch and sip at a set time during the day, and increase concentration and also just boost those serves, as we said. Some of our tips for Crunch and Sip include cutting the snacks into small pieces, so they're easy to just grab and go while you're doing your work. Choosing food that won't make a mess, which the teacher will really appreciate. And picking fresh and seasonal veggies, because they're going to be more affordable and they're going to be tastier. We're always looking for other people's success stories. So if you've got a great Crunch and Sip story, feel free to flick it through to us. Okay, so what if the lunchbox comes back full? We often hear from parents that the lunchbox doesn't get eaten, or they don't have success with what they pack, and we know that that can be extremely deflating and frustrating when you've put a lot of time and effort into preparing yummy foods and they're not getting eaten. Don't forget, if this is a one-off or this is occasional, then it could be for a range of reasons, like your child was sick, or they were particularly time poor on that day, or they were attending a music lesson or kept in at lunch, or just generally not themselves. So yeah, if it's occasional, don't pay too much attention, or just make sure that they get a nice big afternoon tea when they get home. But if this is happening frequently, then we suggest maybe having a look at some of these tips that we're going to go through, and hopefully some of this will help you with more success. These tips are also outlined in the booklet, so if you want more information, it's in here. So they're things like making sure the food is ready to eat, is not messy, is not sticky or soggy, is nice and easy to grab and go. And that's things like just making sure that sandwich is wrapped well, so that by the time they get to school it hasn't turned into a jumble of a sandwich. Making sure lids are on containers nice and tightly so things aren't leaking. A small container of dip to go with veggies is amazingly successful when it comes to kids and vegetable sticks. And that's something like hummus or a guacamole or a tzatziki. When kids can dip, they tend to more readily munch. Keeping it varied. If your child is looking for something a bit different, just because the food you're packing is food they like and food they eat doesn't mean they're going to want to eat those foods all the time. We all like variety, so make sure that you're trying to keep it a little bit varied through the week. On the flip side, if you vary it too much, you can overwhelm children. So find the right balance for your kid, and that comes with the next point, which is keeping them involved. We find that often when kids are involved in the preparation or the planning of a lunchbox, and that might mean helping you make the sandwich in the morning, or it may even just mean grabbing the sandwich and putting it in the lunchbox themselves. But when kids are involved, they tend to be less likely to turn their nose up at the food because they know what to expect when they open the lunchbox. It's not going to take them by surprise. Also ask for feedback. I always say it's fine for kids to choose one healthy option over another, just not to choose no healthy food at all. And my son's a really great example. He was frequently not eating his sandwiches when they had grated carrot in them. So I asked him if there's something I'm putting in there that he doesn't like, or is there a problem? And he told me that he loves carrot, but he doesn't like it grated. So can it please be on the side in carrot sticks? So it was an easy fix. I started doing that. Sandwiches are getting eaten, the carrot sticks are getting eaten, and we're all happy. Leave out the treats. As we said before, leave them out of the lunchbox. It's too difficult for kids to have their self-restraint. We're not there to police it. And we don't want to set up a desirable and non-desirable dynamic with the food that we're putting in the lunchbox. So just leave them out and keep it simple for them. And remember that they're time poor, so don't overpack the lunchbox because kids will often sit there until they're finished, or they sometimes are made to sit there until they're finished. So try and really strike that balance of having just enough and not too much. And that, comes with a bit of trial and error as well. And then also make sure the after-school snack that you're serving is another example of a good, nutritious, whole food, homemade, or good option from the shops, so that they're not, so that it's not a really mixed message, because children are really capable of holding out if they know that what's coming after school is vastly different to what's in the lunchbox. So keep it consistent, and don't give up. Persistence really does pay off. So keep on doing the good work that you're doing. Oh, also, don't be afraid, on that slide, don't be afraid to pull the lunchbox out at the end of the day and have a look what's still left in there. Because if they're not temperature-dependent foods, if they're not foods that had to stay hot or cold, then they're fine to eat at the end of the day. And it sends a good message that the food that's in the lunchbox has to be eaten, and also that we're not wasteful with our food. Sometimes in the car on the way home can be a really great time to open it back up and suggest that they eat those veggies or whatever, the muffin or whatever it might be that got left behind during the day. Okay, school canteen. If you're struggling with the lunchbox and you want to try and change it up during the week, then why not try the school canteen? The healthy food and drinks policy in schools, which is commonly known as the traffic light system, is in all government school canteens. And this system's really great. It puts the food that's available into categories based on the amount of fat, sugar, salt, fibre, and that makes the food selections easier because you know that the canteen's going to have more than 60% from what's known as the green food category and no foods from the red food category. Sometimes in schools the menus are even colour-coded, which makes it even easier for you. But the most important advice that we like to give parents when we talk about the school canteen is that you need to see it as an extension of your home pantry and fridge. Because at the end of the day, the school canteen is a really great opportunity to start teaching kids to be good consumers, to know how to navigate a menu and to know how to choose well over the counter. Because eventually kids are going to be buying food independently, they'll be buying food at high school with their own money, on the weekends with their friends or at sports, and we want to have been able to teach them to look over a menu and decipher the healthy food from the non-healthy food. Also, we suggest that you help out in the canteen if you can, even if it's just one day of the term or one day of the year. You can meet new people, get to know those that are in your community. You can find out what's on offer in the canteen, which gives you even more awareness when you're helping kids order. And you can also share ideas, tips and tricks of your own. And a great example that I have of this is when I was helping out in the canteen and it was Toasty Day. And I just happened to have a conversation with the lady as a canteen manager about giving kids more opportunity to add more veggies to their toasties, because I know from my kids that they love throwing in some grated carrot and some spinach in a cheese and tomato toastie. But if it's not an option on the menu, then it's not something kids can pick. So They were great. They took that on board, they threw it into the drop-down menu on the online ordering system, and now kids can pick extra veggies to throw in their toasties, and lots of kids do. So, you know, being involved is a great way to sort of improve the whole process for everyone. Okay, so now we've talked about what goes in a healthy lunchbox. This is kind of touching on how, you know, the challenges that you face as a parent when you're trying to figure out what is healthy and what is not when it comes to the lunchbox aisle, when it does come to processed and packaged foods. As we said before, we know that packing the lunchbox can feel quite daunting, and that parents are faced with a whole raft of really well marketed foods. You know, in a perfect world, all the foods are going to be homemade and whole foods, but we live in the world that we do, where we need convenience and where there's a lot of food available to us that makes it quicker and easier at times during the week. So we want you to be able to recognise the tactics that are used by food manufacturers so that you are able to at least choose the best of the bunch when it comes to the lunchbox aisle. So these two products are just a quick example of effective marketing that's designed to keep you on your toes and make your job a little more tricky. They both, as you can see, have very attractive packaging, nice kind of matte cardboard finish, lovely green tones. They've got lots of ticks and claims, like 97% fat-free, full of fruit, gluten-free, as you can see over here. They've got little catchphrases like lunchbox friendly, green superfoods. You know, so they're spending a lot of time selling themselves to you. And often we find when a product is you know, telling you a lot about what isn't in there, that they may be trying to conceal what is. So just as an example, this Go Natural bar on the right is a 35-gram bar. And if you turn it over, you can see that 20 grams of that 35 is actually sugar. So that's 55% of the bar in total, that's sugar. You know, and this is a product that's in the health food lunchbox aisle. So it's very difficult for parents to determine what is a good option and what is not when things are so well marketed. With regards to that 20 grams of sugar, it may not have been just straight sugar. It might have come in as honey, as fructose, as you know, rice malt syrup, maple syrup. It could have come in as lots of different, under lots of different names, but at the end of the day, it all adds up to sugar. This is just sort of building on what we just talked about there at the back of the label, having different names for sugar. This is a little resource that we developed. Again, it's in your pack. It's a tiny little wallet card. It's two-sided, and on the back is what you see on your screen. And it's just a way of highlighting that food manufacturers can use lots of different names for sugar and lots of different names for salt. But they all behave the same way in the body. And on a food label, if a list of different sources of sugar are used, then the food manufacturer is able to kind of dilute the ingredients list and litter those words in amongst everything rather than just having to have sugar front and centre. And I'll explain a little bit more about that on the next slide. But basically, using these different terms makes it less obvious, makes it less clear, and makes it harder for the consumer to decipher labelling. So, to overcome some of these challenges, we want to show you how to read a food label. Keep it nice and quick and simple because I know that we're running out of time. Knowing how to read a food label is obviously a really important skill because it helps you to pick healthy food more confidently. So a food label will have a serving size. The serving size is set by the food manufacturer. It's not regulated and it's a difficult way to compare food items. So we always suggest you go to the 100-gram column because that's how you can compare one food from another. It will have an ingredients list and these will be listed from greatest to least. So that's where using different names for sugars and using different sources of sugar is a really clever tactic, because instead of having sugar right at the front, all those different amounts of sugar can be scattered amongst the ingredients in their different quantities, rather than added up to the whole amount and put front and centre. Allergies will be listed in bold, which makes it easy at a glance to see if there's common allergens in a food. A food label will also outline the fat. This will be broken down into total fat and saturated fat, the sugar, the fibre and the sodium, which is what we know as salt. So this is the other side of the resource that I just showed you. This is a great way of knowing what it is that you want to look for. So it's broken down into the green, the amber and the red categories. And it shows you, when you're looking at the per 100 gram column, what it is that you want to see on a food item to know if it's the best choice, if it's okay sometimes, or if you should try to avoid. So we're just going to do a really quick little activity here using grain waves as an example to try and show you how to use this resource. So just going to turn on my highlighter. Okay, so grain waves are really well marketed. They have got very appealing packaging. They've got a list of claims here. They've got a long list of ingredients. And you probably couldn't replicate them at home. So based on what we said before, that sort of indicates they're a highly processed food item. We're going to look at three things quickly. Sugar. This is the nutrition information panel of grain waves. If you look over here at sugar, per 100 grams, we've got 6.7 grams. So then if you come over to the resource, you can see that the sugar sits in the okay sometimes category. Okay, then if you look over here at saturated fat, per 100 grams, we've got 2.6. So if we come over here to the resource, we're sitting in the okay sometimes category again. Now, one of the things that grain waves do is they claim to have 30% less fat than crinkle cut potato chips. So that's a claim that is only relevant to the saturated fat. When you actually look at the total fat, it is the same as most common potato chips, and so is the kilojoule content. So even though we're sitting in the okay sometimes here, when we look at the total fat and come over to here, 22.2 grams per 100 puts it into the try to avoid category, more than 10 grams. So grain waves find themselves in the junk food category. Remember, these are well marketed to children, and they come in lunchbox size packets to try and convince parents that they are lunchbox friendly. So, you know, we're hoping that this resource makes that a little bit simpler for you to be able to determine, well, which are the best of the bunch. So what's the solution to the lunchbox aisle? Essentially, we want you to be able to use the resources that we have just talked about to know how to pick the best of the bunch, and to have some of those there, but to only use them, you know, at the end of the week when your cupboards are bare, or when you need to do food shopping but you haven't got there yet. So in case of emergency, break glass. Don't draw on packaged and processed foods, if possible, as daily staples. Use them for when you need them, but try to be prepared and have lots of really lovely whole food and homemade options there, so that that's what you're drawing on a daily basis. Plan ahead for success. You know, at the end of the day, we have to do planning if we're going to be successful. So be prepared for the week, because when you're prepared for the week, you give kids more opportunity to participate as well, because it's easier for them to help out when everything's kind of well organised. And that's things like shredding the chicken ahead of time, hard boiling the eggs the night before, cooking extra batches of rice or pasta so that you can make other leftovers. And chopping up veg ready to go to throw in punch and sip, which is something that kids can be getting involved in. Shop with the lunchbox in mind. Buy foods that go in the lunchbox nice and easily, like cherry tomatoes, baby cucumbers. Buy big bulk packets of crackers, big tubs of yogurt. Make it easy for yourself to grab the ingredients and pack a healthy lunchbox. cook in bulk. It doesn't have to be every weekend, but when you can, put some time aside on the weekend and make, a double batch of muffins and throw them in the freezer so that it's nice and easy to grab and go in the morning, and they'll defrost across the morning and be ready to go by the time that it's recess. And make mini and mains the night before, because you've got all of your ingredients out, save on time, save on doing dishes twice, and also that's a less stressful time to have kids involved in the process. And then also pack leftovers for lunch. It makes the job so much easier in the morning. Just make sure that you've got the right containers to keep hot food hot, cold food cold, and the right utensils for kids to use. And now we come to our final message. I mean, this is the primary message that we're hoping to share with you today, and that's we'd love lunchboxes to have less packets and more vegetables. If you can make that simple swap, if that's the only thing that changes for you after today, then you've done a really fantastic job, and we're heading in the right direction. We need veggies to be available, we need them to be appealing, and we really need them to be appreciated. So pack them in the mains, pack them in the minis, pack them as snacks on the go, and hopefully we've given you some ideas and tips today that make it easier for you to start hitting those targets for your kids. Plan ahead and be prepared so that veggies don't get forgotten. We want to set our kids up with great habits and teach them to appreciate the veggies. All right, thank you so much for listening. We are at the end of our webinar here. This is our email and website. If you've got any questions that you would like to send through, feel free to email us directly. We are going to send you a post-session link with the survey, so please help us make sure our content is on track by completing the survey. And now we're going to sift through some of the questions that might have come through and see if we can answer. And gone a little bit over time, which I'm really sorry about, but I will quickly have a look at some questions. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Here we go. And open up some questions. Okay, so we've got a question here. What about sultanas? So we suggest that dried fruit is an occasional, not a frequent feature in the lunchbox, purely because obviously dried fruit is, you've removed the water, you've concentrated the sugar, so when it's chewed on during the day, it's going to sit in the teeth, so it can just lead to to issues with teeth if they're eaten very frequently. Having said that, occasionally they're totally fine. They're obviously better than a processed food option. And there are, if you are regional or you don't have access to fruit and veg, then dried fruit sometimes is one of your only good alternatives. So it just comes back to it not being a daily staple. Okay, what have I got here? The question parents and teachers are going to be concerned with is keeping the food safe and not spoiling during hot months. Are there some safer food options for this time? It really helps if you freeze certain foods so that they are, defrosting across the morning. And that's, if, say for example, you do a savoury muffin and that could have a bit of chicken or veg or ingredients in there that you do want to be keeping cool, but because they're coming in a frozen form and then you also just have an ice block in there, then by the time they're being eaten, they're usually fine. Lunchboxes these days, lunchbox packs are insulated. So once you've got insulated and then a freezer block, and then you've got, if the food itself isn't frozen, you can throw in a frozen water bottle or a little frozen tub of yogurt. It's another way to keep it super cold. And so then you'd be fine by the time that you're eating that for recess and lunch. You can also ask teachers if school bags can be kept inside the classroom in the hottest of hot parts of the year rather than in full sun, or at a bare minimum the lunchbox bag taken out and kept inside the classroom. That's what one year ended up happening in one of my child's classes, was the lunchbox bag at least got to stay inside. And then when it comes to hot food, thermoses these days are designed to keep foods hot, across the day. So making sure that it's not going to be too hot when your child actually comes to eat it, but if you've warmed it completely and then popped it in and either let it cool a little or just put the lid straight on if that's the temperature they're fine with, then again, by the time they're eating it for recess and lunch, it's completely fine. How do you respond to everyone else has chips and chocolate in their lunchbox? Personally, I always say to my kids, aren't you lucky, I love you so much. I think at the end of the day, you know, we need to be, there's always going to be comparisons. There's always going to be children with what's perceived as better food or worse food. So we need to be explaining to our kids why we're packing the foods we're packing. I'm packing those foods because I want you to grow a healthy body. I'm packing those foods because, you know, healthy bones are really important if you want to run or jump or, you know, grow old. You know, you've got to find a currency that works for your child. If they love their sports, then use that as an example for why you're picking those foods. But at the end of the day, we're packing those foods because we believe in feeding our kids healthy food, and that's the message we need to be giving them. We love, we care, we want to do the best for them. You know, often you get to the point where those kids who are having lots of chips and chocolate might look over and think, well, that healthy lunchbox looks delicious. I wish I had something like that. So, you know, you need to be saying to kids, like, you're actually really fortunate, you know, so enjoy the beautiful food that we're packing and let's develop an appreciation for healthy food. What else have we got? What about homemade bliss balls? As the ones I make have wheat bix, coconut, dates or dried apricots, sometimes with fresh fruit, but then I'd add maple syrup or a teaspoon or two to sweeten. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you're making food rather than buying food, you're already doing a really fantastic job. Limiting dried fruits somewhat, if you can, is advised because obviously it's very, the sugar content goes up very quickly when you add dried fruits. So I'd just be playing with that recipe to bring the dried fruit down as much as you can to make it still palatable and stay together. But, you know, if they only work with a decent amount of dried fruit, then just don't serve them very often. You know, draw on some other options as more daily staples and save those for, you know, on a Friday or on the weekend. But yeah, it's absolutely fine to be making foods like that because I believe in the fact that when you're making foods with whole ingredients, you're doing a really great job. All right. Thanks, Michaela. When you spoke about processed meat being discretionary at sometimes food and in particular focused on ham, is the ham off the bone any better than the packaged processed ham? So it's definitely going to have less emulsifier and it's definitely going to be, you know, basically a traditional ham on the bone is at least just still the meat as it is that's cured and preserved rather than really commercial processed ham, which is basically a paste that's then sliced into what looks like ham off the bone. If you can pull the ham apart, you can see the sort of meat, then yes, it's a less processed version, but it is still cured and it still has the same preservatives involved to enable it to last the way that it does. So unfortunately, it all sits, it might have lesser quantity of those preservatives, but it still sits in the same category. It's still a processed meat. All right. How often can processed foods like ham be taken? Is once a week okay? If, I mean, once a week is still, it sort of depends what other processed meat is being consumed as well. If, you know, there's bacon in the household as well, if there's other processed meats boosting, being consumed in the week as well, then they all add up. If going from daily to once a week is an achievable goal, then brilliant, you've done a really good job because you've reduced that intake. You know, having it once every couple of weeks is not going to be the end of the world. It's when you're looking at it being a frequent daily intake, and then other processed meats featuring in the week as well, particularly when they then displace or replace the opportunity to be having, you know, lots of really nice alternatives like we talked about that aren't processed and that don't have that same impact in the body. And I think that that is us done. There are no other questions. So thank you so much, everyone. Hope you got something out of it, and spread the word. Thanks, guys.